The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead as Sarah Williams sat in the cold metal chair, her hands shaking as she dialed the familiar number. Her left eye was swollen shut, and dried blood caked the corner of her mouth. The officers had finally allowed her one phone call after 3 hours of processing. "Marcus?" Her voice cracked as her husband answered on the first ring. "Sarah? Baby, where are you? You were supposed to be home 2 hours ago." She took a shuddering breath. "I'm at the 15th precinct downtown." "Marcus, her voice broke completely. There was a moment of deadly silence on the other end. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed completely. It was the voice Sarah had heard only once before, during their first year of marriage when someone had tried to break into their home. It was calm, measured, and absolutely terrifying. "What happened?" "I was coming out of the grocery store. Some officers said I fit the description of a shoplifter. I showed them my receipt, Marcus. I had everything they asked for, but they said I was being difficult and resisting. They threw me on the ground in front of everyone, in front of little kids coming out of the store." Sarah heard something crash in the background, probably Marcus's coffee mug hitting the wall. "Are you hurt?" "My ribs, my face. Marcus, they kept saying things. Horrible things. And everyone was just watching, recording with their phones, but no one helped. I'm coming to get you right now. Don't say another word to anyone until I get there. Do you understand me? They won't let you see me. They said I'm being charged with assault on an officer and resisting arrest. They're saying I attacked them, Marcus. They're lying." The line went quiet for so long Sarah thought the call had dropped. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of every mission he'd ever completed, every enemy he'd ever faced. "Sarah, listen to me carefully. I want you to ask for their names and badge numbers. Write them down. Ask for the arrest report. Don't sign anything. And Sarah? Yeah? Tell them your husband is coming, and he's bringing some friends." 20 minutes later, Marcus Williams walked through the front doors of the 15th precinct. He wasn't alone. Behind him came 6 men, all moving with the same purposeful stride, all carrying themselves with the unmistakable bearing of elite military operators. They wore civilian clothes, but everything about them screamed danger to anyone with eyes to see. The desk sergeant, a 20-year veteran named Murphy, looked up and immediately felt his mouth go dry. He'd seen enough military men in his time to recognize the real deal, and these weren't weekend warriors or wannabes. These were apex predators in human form. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Murphy's voice was steady, but his hand unconsciously moved toward his radio. Marcus stepped forward, and Murphy noticed the man's eyes were completely cold. Not angry, cold. Like looking into the eyes of a great white shark. "My name is Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Williams, United States Navy SEALs. I'm here for my wife, Sarah Williams. She was arrested approximately 3 hours ago." Murphy's blood pressure spiked. He glanced at the computer screen, then back at the group of men who looked like they could take apart the entire precinct with their bare hands. "Sir, visiting hours don't begin until I'm not visiting." Marcus's voice cut through the air like a blade. "I'm collecting my wife, who was assaulted by your officers. Now, we can do this easy, or we can do this hard. But either way, I'm walking out of here with Sarah in the next 10 minutes. One of the men behind Marcus, a massive Hispanic man with scars on his hands, stepped slightly forward. "Chief, maybe we should explain the situation to these fine officers." Murphy's hand was now firmly on his radio, but he hadn't pressed the button yet. Something in these men's demeanor told him that calling for backup might be the worst mistake of his life. "Look, I understand you're concerned about your wife, but no." Marcus placed both hands on the counter and leaned forward slightly. "You don't understand anything. Your officers brutally assaulted an innocent woman today. They beat my wife, a school teacher, a woman who's never had so much as a parking ticket, because they decided she fit a description. Now, I've spent 15 years of my life serving this country, protecting people who can't protect themselves. I've killed men in the defense of American values. And right now, those values are being pissed on in your holding cells." The lobby had gone completely silent. Other officers were beginning to notice the commotion, and Murphy could see them reaching for their radios. Marcus noticed too. Without turning around, he spoke to his team. "Gentlemen, I think these officers might be feeling a little overwhelmed. Why don't you help them stay calm?" What happened next would be talked about in police circles for years. Without any visible signal, the 6 men behind Marcus spread out through the lobby with fluid precision. They didn't draw weapons, didn't make threats, didn't even raise their voices. They simply moved to positions that made it clear that every officer in the room was now covered by a trained killer who could end them before they could blink, but it was done so smoothly, so professionally, that it almost looked choreographed. Like a deadly dance. Murphy's finger froze on his radio button. The message was crystal clear: push that button, and this situation becomes very bad for everyone involved. Now, Marcus continued conversationally, as if nothing had happened. Let's try this again. I want to see my wife. I want to see the officers who arrested her. And I want to see your commanding officer. In that order. Murphy swallowed hard. I'll get the lieutenant. Good choice. Lieutenant Rodriguez had been a cop for 28 years. He dealt with angry husbands, lawyers, politicians, and every kind of troublemaker imaginable. But when he walked into the lobby and saw what was waiting for him, he immediately knew this was different. The 7 men weren't posturing or making a scene. They were just standing there, relaxed and patient, but there was something about them that made every survival instinct Rodriguez had developed over nearly 3 decades start screaming. The one in front, clearly the leader, looked like he could be a banker or a teacher. Average height, quiet demeanor, wedding ring on his finger. But his eyes. Rodriguez had seen those eyes before, in veterans who'd seen too much combat. Lieutenant Rodriguez? I'm Marcus Williams. I believe you have my wife in custody. Rodriguez had dealt with enough military families to recognize the tone. This wasn't a man asking for favors or trying to pull strings. This was a man stating facts and expecting results. Mr. Williams, I understand your concern, but... Senior Chief Williams, Marcus corrected quietly. And I'm not concerned, Lieutenant. I'm here to collect my wife and address the conduct of your officers. Rodriguez felt sweat beading on his forehead. Sir, your wife was arrested for assault and resisting arrest. She injured one of my officers. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus didn't move, didn't change expression, but something in his stillness made Rodriguez's mouth go dry. Show me the body camera footage. I'm sorry? The body camera footage. Your officers wear cameras, correct? I want to see the footage of my wife assaulting your officer. Rodriguez's stomach dropped. The cameras had been malfunctioning that day, a convenient technical problem that seemed to happen whenever certain officers were involved in questionable arrests. The cameras, there was a technical issue. I see. Marcus nodded slowly. How about the security cameras from the grocery store? We haven't reviewed those yet. But you have reviewed the cell phone videos that I'm sure were taken by bystanders? Rodriguez said nothing. Lieutenant, let me explain something to you. The men behind me are some of the most highly trained operators in the United States military. Between us, we have over 100 confirmed kills, 43 successful hostage rescues, and approximately 60 years of combined experience in making very bad people disappear permanently. Rodriguez's hand moved toward his sidearm instinctively. But, Marcus continued, his voice never changing from its conversational tone, we're not here as soldiers today. We're here as citizens. American citizens who believe in justice, in the Constitution, and in the idea that police officers are supposed to protect and serve, not brutalize innocent women in grocery store parking lots. He took a step closer. Now, you have a choice. You can release my wife, provide us with the names and badge numbers of the officers involved, and begin an immediate internal investigation. Or this becomes a federal matter involving the FBI, the Justice Department, and every media outlet between here and Washington, D.C. Rodriguez looked around the room. His officers were outnumbered and outclassed, and everyone knew it. More importantly, he was beginning to realize that this Marcus Williams wasn't bluffing about anything, not his military background, not his connections, and definitely not his willingness to turn this into a career-ending scandal for everyone involved. I'll have Mrs. Williams brought up immediately. Excellent. Oh, and Lieutenant? Yes, sir? The officers who did this, I want to meet them personally. Sarah Williams had never been more grateful to see her husband's face. When they brought her up from the holding cells, she was barely holding herself together, but the moment she saw Marcus standing there with his team, she knew everything was going to be all right. Marcus examined her injuries with the clinical eye of someone trained in field medicine, and Rodriguez watched his jaw tighten with each new bruise and cut. Who did this? Marcus asked quietly. Officers Peterson and Kowalski, Rodriguez answered before Sarah could speak. I want to see them. Sir, I don't think, Lieutenant. Marcus turned to face Rodriguez, and the lieutenant saw something in those eyes that made him understand why enemy combatants surrendered rather than face men like this. I'm going to talk to the officers who beat my wife. This is going to happen. The only question is whether it happens here, in an orderly fashion, or whether it happens later, under less controlled circumstances. Rodriguez made a decision that probably saved 2 careers and possibly 2 lives. I'll get them. Officers Peterson and Kowalski were brought into the lobby 5 minutes later. Both men were large, both were used to intimidating civilians, and both felt confident that their union and their badges would protect them from any real consequences. That confidence lasted about 10 seconds. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't make threats. He simply walked up to Peterson, the larger of the two, and spoke in a voice that everyone in the room could hear. "Officer Peterson, my name is Senior Chief Marcus Williams. You arrested my wife today." Peterson puffed up his chest. "She assaulted me, resisted arrest, no." Marcus's voice cut through Peterson's bluster like a knife through paper. "You brutalized an innocent woman because you could. Because you thought no one would hold you accountable." Peterson's partner, Kowalski, was looking nervously at the 6 men spread around the lobby. Unlike Peterson, he was smart enough to recognize danger when he saw it. "You made a mistake today, Officer Peterson. You hurt someone I love. Someone under my protection." Marcus stepped closer, and Peterson suddenly realized that for all his size and bluster, he was looking up at a man who radiated more quiet menace than anyone he'd ever encountered. "I want you to look around this room," Marcus continued. "Look at these men with me. We've spent our lives protecting people like my wife from predators. We've traveled to the worst places on earth to fight evil in all its forms. And today, we find out that the evil has come home." Peterson's bravado was evaporating rapidly. Up close, he could see the scars on Marcus's hands, the way he moved, the absolute certainty in his eyes. "Now, you're going to apologize to my wife. You're going to mean it. And then you're going to hope that the justice system protects you from the consequences of what you've done, because I promise you, and I want you to understand that when I make a promise, it's as binding as a law of physics. If you ever touch my wife again, if you ever come near her, if you ever so much as look at her wrong, there won't be enough left of you for a proper burial." The lobby was dead silent. Peterson looked like he was about to wet himself. "Do we understand each other?" Peterson managed a nod. "Good. Now apologize to my wife." What followed was the most sincere apology Peterson had ever given in his life. He looked Sarah in the eyes, told her he was sorry, and meant every word, partly because he was genuinely ashamed, but mostly because he was absolutely terrified of what would happen if he didn't. The story didn't end there, of course. Within a week, body camera footage from surrounding buildings had mysteriously found its way to local news stations. The footage clearly showed Sarah Williams being brutally assaulted by officers Peterson and Kowalski while she was attempting to show them her receipt and cooperate fully. The district attorney, faced with video evidence of clear police brutality and the intense media attention that followed, had no choice but to drop all charges against Sarah and file charges against the officers involved. Peterson and Kowalski were fired, arrested, and eventually convicted. The city settled the resulting lawsuit for an undisclosed amount that was rumored to be substantial, but what really changed things was what happened in the weeks and months that followed. Marcus Williams, it turned out, wasn't just any Navy SEAL. He was connected to a network of veterans who had grown increasingly frustrated with the militarization of police forces and the abuse of power they witnessed in their home communities. What started as one man protecting his wife became a movement. Veterans across the country began organizing to hold law enforcement accountable, using the same skills they'd learned in the military to document abuse, support victims, and ensure that justice was served. They called themselves the Constitutional Guard, and their motto was simple: "We swore an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic." And as for Sarah Williams, she recovered from her injuries and went back to teaching. But she never forgot the feeling of helplessness she experienced that day, or the feeling of empowerment when her husband and his brothers-in-arms stood up for what was right. Sometimes, she would tell her students, justice isn't just about laws and courts. Sometimes, it's about good people refusing to let evil triumph, no matter what uniform it wears. 6 months later, officers Peterson and Kowalski were in federal prison, serving sentences for civil rights violations. The 15th Precinct had undergone a complete overhaul of its procedures and personnel. And Marcus Williams had received a commendation from the Secretary of the Navy for his continued service to his community and country, but the most important change was smaller, more personal. Sarah Williams walked a little taller, spoke a little louder, and never again doubted that there were people in her life who would move heaven and earth to protect her. And somewhere, in police stations across the country, the story was being told as a reminder: every citizen you encounter might have someone who loves them enough to hold you accountable for your actions. Choose accordingly.